get ours, they should be coming either later this week or next week. We will be sure to take some pictures as well, and we'll have something on Facebook also.
Great. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks again.
Greg, you want to keep the...
Thank you to the Rotary. They reached out to me about a month or so ago and asked simply, what can we do to support the police department? We talked about a couple of things, and then, of course, as you know, we've had some COVID. Issues within the PD, and so what better time to use some money to help us in that effort and get UV light that helps us disinfect. So as Betty had stated, we did use the fire department's light a couple of times during kind of our crisis moment. This will make it obviously a lot easier for us to do it, not just in the vehicles, but also in the office and work spaces as well. So an awesome donation from the Rotary, and we thank them from the bottom of our hearts. When we do get ours, they should be coming either later this week or next week. We will be sure to take some pictures as well, and we'll have something on Facebook also.
Great. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks again.
Greg, you want to keep the Chief?
Thanks, Chief. And actually, we could transition after Chief hands off the check, though, into the next section of the report. First up, under City Manager's report, Chief Colmeyer can speak to both the incident this weekend that's gotten a fair amount of interest in and outside the community, and just generally also on 4th of July weekend just passed.
I'll actually, if you don't mind, I'll have Assistant Chief Minor speak to 4th of July.
That's fine.
Yeah, he got a full brief and was prepared to give that presentation tonight. So
great.
To address the question brought up by Councilman Wahusky, there was quite a bit of Facebook communication over the weekend. I'm not sure if everyone's seen it or not. It started primarily yesterday, and it revolved around an incident that had taken place on June 30th involving some juveniles near Washington Park here in Two Rivers. That incident, and I'm going to try not to, I'm going to expand on it a little bit, but there are juveniles that are involved. It is still under investigation to an extent, so I want to be careful not to say things that, number one, we can't release because of laws that regulate us on juvenile information, and number two, again, there's ongoing investigation. But it's important to share the information because, as I stated, I think at our last meeting, or perhaps the one before when we talked about COVID, is that it's important to be transparent and forthright with the community, and that's what we tried to do on Facebook throughout Sunday and then again today. So in that incident, what happened was there was an 11-year-old juvenile that had been challenging, I guess is the best way to say it, an 8-year-old juvenile. Another 11-year-old came to kind of the defense of that 8-year-old, and the original 11-year-old, in challenging that 8-year-old, was making derogatory comments towards that person, talking about their sexual orientation and mental capacity. The other 11-year-old came over, the confrontation, the verbal confrontation kind of ensued, and some additional comments were made of a racial nature to the original 11-year-old. At that point, things just kind of continued. It never got physical. No one was injured. One of the kids, the original 11-year-old, tried to leave the area. The others chased after, and then a area resident was contacted by the initial 11-year-old, and then a parent was called, and then we ultimately got called to investigate. The officer did do an investigation, did speak to all of the juveniles involved. Again, there still are some things that are ongoing. The information was consistent with what I just shared with you. Of course, that wasn't necessarily what was given throughout the, in the time. That was derived through all of the context that they had. It was decided at that point that there were clearly two individuals that were involved in this situation. It wasn't just necessarily that there was one, and that there was only one victim, so to speak, in the situation, and the other one was just an instigator or causing the issue. That it actually was both that were going back and forth, one with derogatory terms regarding sexual orientation and mental capacity, and then the other regarding racial slurs. So the officer decided at that point to issue a citation to both parties, which is can be standard practice in situations where you have two people that are engaged in something, and it's clearly a reciprocal situation, and so both parties would be cited. It does meet the standard of disorderly conduct. The officer, believing that a municipal citation was in order, did issue one citation to one of the parties, the individual that kind of came to the aid of the 8-year-old, and they did not actually physically issue the second citation, which was to the initial person who had approached the 8-year-old. That was to be mailed. I came to before this meeting about a month ago and talked about this city's and the police department's zero tolerance for discrimination of any kind within the city of Two Rivers, and I think we all agreed with that and wanted to uphold those standards here. And in doing so, that officer felt it was necessary to issue those citations to send that clear message. The officer was under the understanding that those citations could be issued because there are a number of violations under municipal court rules that allow municipal citations to be issued for juveniles as young as 6 years of age. Unfortunately, for a disorderly conduct charge, the age for that is 12 years old. So the 11-year-olds that were to be cited by the officer would not actually be able to be cited because municipal court does not have jurisdiction at that age. The only recourse, if you will, would be to forward those recommendations of charges to the Department of Human Services, and then they would decide whether they would take action on that and whatever action they decided. This situation with the 11-year-olds in the park and exchanging verbal statements to each other wouldn't rise to the level of us forwarding something down to Human Services typically, and so that was not done in this case. Understanding that that was the case, that the citations could not be issued, I posted and sent out a press release today, which you may or may not have seen, but I did send it out, that indicated everything I just basically told you now, that those citations are being withdrawn as a result of the fact that municipal court did not have jurisdiction. And I really, I guess, implored the community, and particularly, I think the parents in this case, to take care of the discipline in this situation on their own. That's probably good advice under all circumstances, probably great advice under this circumstance. But like I said, the City of Two Rivers and the Two Rivers Police Department really want to take a stance and really believe in the fact that there shouldn't be any discrimination in our community. I think our community has supported us in that effort, and the officer was doing what they thought was the right thing to do and in keeping with that. So that's basically the maybe not so short rundown of the situation. Is there any specific questions that anyone has? I can try and answer them for you.
Sounds like a job well done.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks.
And we'll call Ben up in just a minute, or feel free, come on up now.